Hello, and welcome to the Simply Business Interview Podcast, a podcast created by business owners for business owners. I am your host, John Jennings. I believe that most business owners are working way too hard for much too little. And one of our issues is that we overcomplexify things. I believe the answers are almost always within us or within our reach. I like to say that I'm a simple man with simple ideas. So welcome to Simply Business. All right, today we are joined by Brad Flowers. He is the founder and CEO of Bullhorn, and he is also an author of an interesting book we're going to talk about. Looking forward to getting to know a little more about Brad and his entrepreneurial journey. So, Brad, why don't you just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Thanks, John. Co-founder of Bullhorn and running this show now. We do naming, brand identity, and brand launch, and we mainly work for professional services companies. So anytime where if you have a company and you're selling your expertise, that's when we'd be a good fit. So that's kind of something to keep in mind, that expertise point, because our perspective is that when you're thinking about how to position your expertise, that's something that's fundamentally different than selling a product, because your expertise is part of you. It's your perspective, it's the collective brain power of your team, and it kind of resides within your culture. So we've been doing it for 15 years now, and that's us.
Yeah, that's you. Well, and we share kind of a common interest
Yeah.
there. We both pretty much served almost the exact same dynamic. I
Yeah.
always say I'm looking for people who essentially are putting their name and reputation on the line. That's who I like to work with. Whether that's Joe the plumber who's got his name on the side of his truck,
Yeah. It's a great way to put it.
or that's a a healthcare provider, as IT consultant.
Yeah.
Whatever they're selling something. They're not selling widgets. They're not. I mean, they may sell widgets as part of it, but they're really selling their expertise. My first sales role was with an IT organization, and we were not the cheapest, but we believed ourselves to be among the best, and
Yeah.
we sold based on our reputation and I just always enjoyed that part a lot more than oh yeah, we also have to sell this equipment and mark it up 10%. And people would go,
Right.
well, I can get that cheaper at,
Right.
whatever. Like,
Right.
yeah, that part doesn't excite me. I'm really about selling our knowledge and expertise. So we share a similar interests there. And it was a funny story when we first connected here a couple of weeks ago, when your name and your company rang a bell to me, and I couldn't think why. And then you mentioned the book. You have a book called The Naming Book,
Yep.
and I realized I've read that book, and as I was trying to go through some branding thoughts of my own. So, tell us a little bit about why you wrote the book, and I love the way it's laid out. Let's talk about that a little bit as
Yeah,
well.
sure. So it's one of those things that maybe a lot of probably the best ideas come from this, where it really came from a need. So let's see, I can't exactly remember when, but early on we were working with a nonprofit client, and they were at this sort of crossroads, and they were like, look, our mission isn't really relevant anymore. Um, and we really need to reposition. And we have this idea to do this totally other thing. And we think we need a different name to do that. Do you all do naming? And we're like, well, yeah, we hadn't done it before, but it hadn't stopped us. We've done a lot of things for the
That's the
first time.
entrepreneurial answer, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we could probably figure that out. And so, it was really stressful and challenging, but and we had no idea what we're doing. We had like pieces of paper everywhere, like all over the table, and we're throwing stuff away and looking things up. And so that project was sort of the seed of what became our naming practice, just because it was so interesting and so challenging. Um, and I have a degree in English, so like I kind of come at this
Hmm.
from a branding perspective, a little different than most people. Most times an agency starts there's a graphic designer, they're a freelancer, they have some success, they need to hire some help.
Right.
We came from a totally different place, so we've always been language first. And
Okay.
so we started doing these naming projects, and it's one of those things that just because I think it's so specific, we were able to communicate that pretty clearly. And as they came up, we just got more and more projects where I needed to hire some help. I couldn't do it anymore. Um, but if it's hard to hire a namer is the thing. There's just aren't, it's not something you really go to school for.
Right.
And so I had lots of friends who were writers or, thought about words in interesting ways. And so what I needed was kind of a system to bring them along, to help them go from being someone who thinks about words in interesting ways to someone who can take that and then create brand names. And so I really just started reading everything I could find, and the book just didn't exist then.
Yeah.
There were books about the history of brand names, which is really interesting. There were a couple of books about namers, kind of personal opinions about names, what name makes them good, and that's also interesting, but not terribly helpful if you need to actually generate a name. And
Right.
so I started thinking, okay, how would I do it, and laying it out. And I created this sort of internal system, these kind of 5 steps, which um, ended up becoming the really the format of the book. We're kind of guiding someone through the 5 steps to create a name. And I I reached out to a book writing coach and just said, "Hey, I kind of have this thing. It's grown to, I think at that point it might have been 30 or 40 pages long, just internally, just to communicate this." And she was like, "Oh yeah, this would be a great book." And so um, she helped me write it, and I I pitched it to I reached out to a woman on LinkedIn who was with Entrepreneur Press, and they ended up publishing the book. And it was a great experience. Their team helped make it much stronger because
Yeah.
when you're close to something, you have just a ton of blind spots, and so they helped me
Right.
fill it out.
Yeah.
And so really the book leads you through. It's aimed at the entrepreneur who kind of needs one name and then just wants to forget about naming and move on to the thousand other things that they need to do.
Right.
This
Right.
isn't really like a it's not really a tool for namers. So really it's this audience. Like
Yeah.
if you're thinking about going out on your own, if you have a name, and maybe you're thinking this might not be the intellectual property that's going to allow me to kind of build my business. There might be name conflicts and you want to rename. This could be your tool. It's at least a starting point. And it leads you through the first step, which most people skip, which is creating the criteria by which you determine what makes a good
Yeah.
name.
Right.
You need to decide what makes it good and bad. Other than that, it's just going to be your personal feelings. And, I think it's important for someone to like a name because it can give you confidence.
Yeah.
But your preferences aren't necessarily the most important thing. Then we go through several exercises. So it's kind of laid out like a workbook in the middle section where there are actually several ways to actually generate lots of words. I'm kind of a firm believer that in any creative pursuit, if you want to create one great thing, you have to generate lots of things to get there.
Yeah.
That's kind of the second mistake people make is they're digging around looking for just the one perfect word when
Yeah.
really you need hundreds. Like if we're going to do a naming project, we'll easily generate 400 or 500 names.
Yeah.
Um, because it's just what it takes. There's just like so much competition for names, and
I
yeah.
feel very inadequate at this point because I think I came up with maybe three or something like that.
It's so hard.
But
I
I'm not
think,
a that's not my mind doesn't work that way.
yep,
I'm
yep,
I'm I'm uh, inquisitive about things. I'm
yeah.
curious. I ask a lot of questions and things, but that creative gene of thinking of something doesn't happen very often. It happens every now and then, and I'm like, I feel like I've you know made major accomplishment when I do. But when you
Absolutely.
say 300 or 400 names, like, oh, I can't even imagine. I don't remember how long when I'd worked through the workbook and the book. I don't remember how many names I came up with, but it was not a very long list.
We actually are doing a project right now for a public relations agency in New York, and it's, you don't think there are like a ton of PR agencies, but when you start to think of the trademark registration, they're in the same class as all other professional services companies, basically.
Right.
So I mean, if you think of all the ad agencies and marketing agencies and
Oh
architecture
gosh.
firms,
Yeah.
you start to get like, this is a really long list. And so
Yeah.
it's super competitive. And you think, oh, this is the perfect idea. And then, of course, it's, someone already has taken it because it's a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
Um, so yeah, there was a book that was formative for me early on. There's another agency, they do kind of the really creative thinking work. It's called IDEO, and their founders wrote a book on creativity, and they give this story of this pottery class, and the goal at the end of the class, they're going to be ranked on their best piece. Or no, I'm sorry, they split the class into two. One side, they have one, they're going to be graded on the best piece. The other half of the class is going to be graded on how much their pottery weighs. So they just had to create as much work as possible. And
Okay.
what was interesting is the class that had to create the most work also always created the best work. So it's just this interesting kind of paradox about creativity, where if you're kind of trying to refine down to this one little perfect thing, it's if you don't go really broad first, you're probably going to miss the mark.
Yeah. 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 It's the old throwing spaghetti up against the wall and seeing what sticks, right? You try a lot of
Need a lot of
things.
spaghetti.
Yeah, a lot of spaghetti.
Yeah.
It gets to be a mess after a while, but that's usually in the mess is usually where you find your best
Yeah.
stuff, right? Yeah.
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 And so for naming for clients, a lot of times people find themselves in the situation where maybe the firm has been successful for 30 or 40 years. The founder's retiring, the next generation, for whatever reason, is either as they take over, they want to make their mark, or they're sometimes over the course, just you change your direction enough to where the original name doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
And so we often come in those situations. For example, there was an IT firm that we worked with, and it was called DMD Data. Um, and it was just the founder's initials, DMD. But what
Okay.
happened is they started getting all these inquiries about dental office, um,
Of course.
IT systems. And
Yeah.
they're like, we don't do any of this. And it's like a total distraction. And so that's just a good example where there was an initial idea for a name, which seemed straightforward enough, founder's
Sure.
initials, but it ended up over time being a distraction, and it restricted their growth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that's kind of how we approach it. Not just new names, we do a lot of renaming successful
Yeah. So
organizations.
and I see that a lot because I do a lot of, succession planning, new owners taking over. Sometimes it's a just somebody from within. Sometimes it's a buy
Yep.
situation. And that's always a topic,
Yep.
do we keep the name or not? And sometimes the name is so established,
Yep.
people will keep it even though, whoever DMD is not around anymore. But
Yeah.
is that kind of your guideline? Do you have some best thoughts on that? It's like if it's not serving its purpose anymore, or it, sometimes it's a. I mean, I know there's examples of like really poorly named companies, but their brand is
Yeah.
just so strong. They
They're
just
successful.
they just keep it. What's your thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
There's tons of examples. I mean, you think of the iPhone, like that's a really stupid name. It's like it's a genuinely awful name for a product. Like something like BlackBerry is infinitely better. It's more evocative, it's more interesting. Um, but the funny thing about how our minds work, we create these kind of halo effects. And so the iPhone is so much more successful that we put positive attributes, even though the name, like if you think about it, is really terrible. Um, so what we would say to someone considering, like, should we do a name change? Should we do a rebrand? Whatever the situation is, I would say it's hard to get brand equity, and I
Yeah.
I would generally recommend, unless it's restricting unless there's either some problematic history or if it's restricting your vision for where the company could go, um, I probably wouldn't suggest changing it. But there
Right.
are lots of situations where it is actually restricting growth, or situations where as you expand geographically, it just doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah.
We're working on a naming project for a regional bank, and they start off, it's named after a region, and because they think they're always going to be in that region, and then as they expand, it's like this doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my general guidance is if it limits your vision, if it restricts your business opportunities, I would think about it. Sooner is always better. There's never like a better time. Uh,
I see a lot
and
of I've got a couple friends in particular that have names of their businesses include the area code, and
mhm,
that again, that's one of those things that sort of limits you. And then now they're talking about renumbering the area code, so
yep,
may not even be in that area code anymore.
right.
So, uh,
The other situation sometimes happens is if there's a trademark conflict, especially as someone grows. Oftentimes, with professional services, people just kind of start and name it whatever.
right,
And, it could be your name, your area code, doesn't matter. Um, and so in the United States, we have common law trademark. This gets like a little nitty gritty. I'll try not to get too boring. But basically, as you start to use a name, it establishes your right to use that name. It's sort of like a common law marriage in that way. So
yeah,
it's a common law trademark. However, common law trademarks are usually restricted geographically. So if you're offering business consulting and you name it out, it's John Jennings Consulting, you're you're establishing your right to use it in your greater kind of like Louisville area, wherever,
right,
whatever your region is. If you
yeah,
start to expand, there's a guy in New York City who's had it before you. His rights would precede yours, and you would have to change your name.
wow,
So
okay,
if there's a situation that sometimes happens, where is as you grow beyond kind of your local or regional initial footprint, and this happens a lot, you can imagine like financial planners or architects,
sure,
people who think they're only ever going to do local work, and then
yeah,
something happens and they start to grow. And then there's a conflict with a company that's larger or just older. And so can come in those situations and help create that. I mentioned intellectual property earlier. We really think of your name as sort of your foundational intellectual property.
yeah,
It's that main thing that you're going to
right,
kind of build your business on. And so if for some reason you can't build a business if it can't be a piece of intellectual property anymore, that's another situation where it might be a good idea to think of renaming.
yeah, interesting. Well, let's pivot back to usually when I'm talking to founders, I'm wanting
Yeah.
to learn more about where you came about founding this company, what inspired you to do that. You mentioned it was English, you have an English major background, so
Yeah.
and then I guess you started around 2010 or so, right, somewhere in that period, and that was
2008.
eight. I mean,
Yeah.
that was a brutal brutal time in the economy. So
Yes.
let's take a little moment down, memory lane, and what provoked you to want to start a branding company in the midst of one of the worst recessions we'd seen in a while.
Yeah. Um, well, like most branding people, I started off working at a bike shop, which is a
I
bit
almost had a
base.
spit take there. I was taking a drink right when you said that. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah. Don't spit on your screen. Yeah. So basically, we started in the worst recession because we didn't know what we were doing. Luckily, if we knew what we were doing, we wouldn't have done it. Um, I actually was working at a bicycle store, and I was running the bike shop, and it was it was actually a great experience for how to run a business. I
yeah,
because I had an English degree, so I had zero business experience. I
right.
It never occurred to me that you could just start a business. I had no idea that that was a thing.
Yeah,
And so working at the shop, you get this idea. You every year you can have to plan. You have to plan what you're going to buy, what are trends, what people might want. And then on a day-to-day basis, you have to help people kind of uncover what are your dreams? Like, where do you want to go? Like, what does this bicycle help you become? Is it fitter? Do you want to do this particular ride? Do you want to go to work? Whatever it is. And then help not just provide the means to kind of get to that dream, but then also provide that long-term service so that there's this long-term value. So in terms of like really basic business fundamentals, it was kind of an invaluable lesson. I don't think I could have taken a class that would have better prepared me probably. So
Yeah.
um, the problem was I had sort of peaked out and I was 30 years old and there was nowhere else to really go. So that I worked through that summer, the busy period. Then I left in August of 2008. I met a friend of mine that I met through the bike shop actually was running citywide music festivals, and I was helping to put on this citywide bike festival. And I left the shop in August of 2008 and thought probably I needed to kind of finish working on a house that when my wife and I purchased an old house, and um, and then I thought I would work on that for a little while. We'll move in, and then I'll get a job at like an ad agency as a copywriter or something. I could write. I had a bunch of writing experience,
Right.
and of course, there were approximately zero agencies across the whole United States hiring copywriters in the
Right.
fall of 2008. And
Yeah.
so the funny thing is if there would have been anyone hiring, I would have taken the job. But since they weren't, I became a reluctant entrepreneur. My friend and I started an agency. We started Bullhorn that fall. We registered, I think, October of 2008. And we had this idea that, there were a lot of these like city sponsored festivals. We'll do, festival marketing. That's sort of what we'll do. And we very quickly learned another good business lesson that everyone wanted our help. However, no one wanted to pay for it.
Right.
So that's a good lesson. It's like, okay, well, we're creating value, but like, how do we actually get paid for this value? And we pivoted to we did general small business marketing, and then over this 15-year window, I think was um, really the process of how do we go from being generalists in this small market to being specialists in a much bigger market. And that's kind of been the trajectory that we've been on. That again, like right off the bat, people always say, oh, specialize, specialize. And that's good advice, but it's also luxury of having money. If you don't have any money, you kind of have to do whatever you can do to
Yeah.
keep the ball rolling. And so we did a lot of really strange projects. We had a friend call that first summer of 2009, and she was like, I don't know what Bullhorn is, but can you guys sell beer? And we were like, she was like, I'm putting on this music festival and our beer vendor backed out. And so, we were like, yeah, we can get a 1-day liquor license, and we've sold beer at this music festival. Of course, that wasn't what we wanted to do, obviously, but it's
Right.
like, it's an example of like, until you can create the runway needed to focus, sometimes you have to do stuff that you don't want to do just to keep things going. And so
Yeah.
that was another lesson we learned. It's like focusing is great, but you also need to keep the lights on. So
Yeah.
we've gone from being really generalists, working for kind of any local small business, to now we really work uh, across the whole country at any one time. We're working with people on both coasts, um, and and we really have this kind of deep expertise in brand, and then also this vertical expertise in professional services.
Yeah. And that's there's such a good lesson that I think a lot of entrepreneurs, especially those who kind of start in this kind of space where you are, where I am,
Yeah,
coaching, consulting, uh, advising, whatever it might be. You, we all know that the more you niche down, the more specific, and this is we serve service businesses.
yeah,
Those people are put their name on the line. The more you can niche down like that, the better you're going to be able to serve that audience, and you're going to be more successful in the long run. But in those early days, I used to say my niche in my early days was they had a paycheck and a pulse.
that's
they
it.
were they were living and breathing and could pay me
That's it.
something.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's that. And you're right. It's that okay. Uh, Part of it's so you have the ability to be able to say, yeah, I've got this client. You don't have to tell them that that client, you're selling beer for them. You're not you're not actually doing marketing stuff. Uh, but you get that. There's a confidence that builds when you have a client. There's experience
Yep.
of just dealing with clients, even if they're not the type of client you want to work with in the long run.
Absolutely.
And so that's actually one of those lessons. I work with, some new coaches. I'm mentoring them, and it's one of the
Mhm.
advice I give them. I'm like, early on, just find work,
Yeah.
and find ways of staying busy, staying productive, uh, doing things that will build your experience up. So that's actually some really good advice.
Yeah.
So what was the biggest surprise early on as a business owner? Because you didn't have any of this training, you didn't have a minor in entrepreneurship or anything. So you had the bike shop BS degree or whatever.
Yeah. The BS in bicycle selling. That's pretty funny. That's what
Yeah.
I did have.
So what was that first kind of unexpected aha kind of thing that you ran into?
I think you hear these success stories when you're listening to a podcast or reading business books. And so the biggest, I think, surprise was there's like, we weren't successful overnight.
Yeah.
It's like, this is taking forever.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that it's that insight that, and I can't remember, I've seen it in a lot of different places, so I don't know who to attribute it to, but it's the idea that the successful entrepreneur isn't the one who has like the best insight, who has the best idea, but it's the person who does like who does the stuff that other people, the boring things that other people don't want to do, and they'll
Right.
do it for longer than other people will do it. And that's like
Yeah.
really what separates people. And I think if anything, that's what I don't know. I mean, early on, I think we got a lot of traction just by being nice. Like if you answer the phone, you're nice.
Yeah.
If you screw something up, you take responsibility for it. Like just like basic stuff like that, it goes
Yeah.
an awful long way
Yeah.
initially. And then I think just like the basic, like business isn't actually that complicated. There are like a handful, you could probably, whittle it down to five principles. And if you can like stick to those things and work at them, um, you know, when it's boring, when you're burned out, when you're tired, that's what separates successful entrepreneurs from people who end up washing out and doing something else.
Yeah, we don't like to tell people that there's only 5 or 6 things. We want them to think it's a lot more
There's like
complicated. So
60
they'll
or
hire us.
70. John will help you figure out the 60 or 70 things that you need to be doing every day.
No, actually, it's funny you say that because actually one of my, when I kind of get my purpose statement or whatever, I always say that one, I think most entrepreneurs and business owners are working way too hard for much too little.
Yeah,
I truly
absolutely.
believe that. And then the other is I think we over complexify things. And that really, like you said, running a business comes down to just a handful of things. I mean, you got to
Yeah.
fill a pipeline. You got to have a product that people will buy and buy at a profit, by the way.
Yes.
Sometimes people
Just
don't,
good
and
lesson.
you just kind of boil it down to some of those basic things. And I find it in my own business. I'll get really busy. I was just telling you, I was really busy this summer, so I wasn't
Yeah.
doing as much business development, prospecting, networking, and my pipeline's a little smaller now than I'd like
Yep.
it to be. So, I've got some free time now. So guess what I need to be out doing? I need to
Yeah.
be getting
Doing
out,
your marketing.
doing
Yeah.
some marketing and some networking. So it's just that's business, and you have to keep doing
Yeah.
it. And it's real easy, when you're busy to go, oh man, I got this made. It's just going to
Yeah.
keep on
Yeah.
coming. But no, you have to kind of every part of the business has to constantly be. It's like spinning plates. You have to constantly be spinning.
Yep.
Oh, I need to go over and spin this plate a little bit. Keep it moving.
I
So
think I think it's especially true of professional services because you win the business, you have to onboard them, then you have to do the business, and at some point you still have to do these other things, but it's like when you get busy, those things drop. And
yeah,
so success sort of creates these these like this like ebb and flow or this binge and bust sort of cycle where like your
Yeah.
revenue's really jagged. Um, and so yeah, that's another thing that I think we hear that a lot as a problem. And I think stopping to think about these kind of fundamental things, what's this core of your culture? Who are you? Who are you serving? What's the kind of this core element
Yeah.
of your strategy, your business strategy, which is sort of part of your brand strategy. Um, Nailing those down can help kind of smooth that out a little bit.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because it's if and it's the reason we know that is because it happens to us.
Yeah.
We get busy and it's like, oh, I didn't have time to write that blog post this week because I had to actually work for clients and,
Yeah.
I had to onboard an employee or whatever you have to
Right.
do. It's like all the stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, we always talk about working in the business versus on the business and all that kind of stuff,
Yep.
and then we end up finding ourselves in that same scenario. And so we talk about uh, you know getting help and delegating and all those types of things, and we have to
Absolutely.
do it even when you're a solopreneur. You're not a solopreneur. Your group has grown. Uh, what at what point in that journey, 15-year journey, what point did you feel like this is really going to work? This is going to be something real. Because
Mm,
those first couple of years are brutal, and especially when you start in the middle of a recession, had to
yeah.
be. Mine was COVID. I was 18 months in when COVID hit, uh,
Woo.
and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I was just getting my legs going, and then it's like, oh, got to learn to walk again. So
Yeah.
you came up in a tough time as well. When did that all kind of gel? At what point do you feel like that hit your stride?
I think I think because of the way we started, like because of the timing, like we had no experience, no book of business. We started in a way that most people don't start firms like ours. Like most people have some base of work that they're going to bring with
Yeah,
them or like
yeah,
something. So it probably took us because of that, it took us a little longer, I think, to reach that maturation because it was a long period of like, what are we doing? Like that figuring out that kind of market match took us a little bit longer because of our lack of experience. Um, but I think I don't remember exactly how long, but the thing for me that really I felt like I had made it when I got my first payroll check. When I went from being like distribution to distribution and like hoping there was something left at the end of the month to take for
yeah,
myself, when I was on payroll and like I was like, oh man, yeah, this is totally gonna work. And I
yeah,
think my salary was $40,000,
yeah.
which is like, which is a lot of money, but for what I was doing
No,
it wasn't what I had ultimately hoped.
yeah. Back
But
to that. Most business owners are working way too hard for much too little.
yeah,
And when was that? Was that 3 years in, 4 years in?
I
What or
think it was
two?
about 4 years in. I can't
Uh,
exactly, somewhere between 3 and 5. I can't exactly remember,
yeah,
but it was around that 2011. And, there were a couple of things that happened. I had kids in 2010 and so that was sort of an inciting incident where it was like, okay, like this can't just be like a hobby, like a fun thing that I do. Like
yeah.
it's
Suddenly,
either has to
other
work.
mouths depend on you, right? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And and by then we had brought on a couple of full-time people. Initially we thought what we would do, our business model would be we would be kind of project managers, and for each project we would hire up creatives to kind of like staff these projects. Quickly became evident that we're actually lousy project managers, and so we need to actually hire a project manager, and
yeah,
we actually wanted to do some of the creative work. So um we ended up hiring people, and that's also it's like once you realize it's like these people have to pay their mortgage, it's like serious
yeah.
business. And so you don't you don't care about the numbers until the numbers really matter,
Right.
and when people's lives depend on it, when there's well-being, when your family, it's like all of a sudden, like I had never been interested in numbers. I had never taken an accounting class. I think the highest math class I took was called college math. And the main theme of college math that I remember is, and the teacher did this big long proof, and it was basically like, don't play the lottery.
Yeah.
That was like weeks of the class was showing how dumb it was to play the lottery.
Usually they do how to manage your checkbook, which when we
Yeah,
had checkbook, that was another thing because
yeah,
sadly a
that's
lot
right.
of people thought that if there were checks in the checkbook, that meant there was money in the checking account,
Yeah,
and
that's not always true.
you had to teach people how that worked, and that was
Totally.
oh that's funny. So you got this now that you got this successful business 15 years in.
Yeah.
You mentioned you had kids, so you've got a family as well.
Yep.
Uh, what how is uh, one of my least favorite words used in our industry is work-life balance. Uh,
Hmm.
but I prefer work-life alignment, like
Yeah.
alignment with your priorities.
Yeah.
And I love how I had a guest a couple weeks ago say, um, how did she say it? She said, as long as I can go home at night and give the attention to my family that I want to give to them, I feel like I'm aligned. I'm okay. It's the moment goes home and feels like I don't have time for the kids. I got to take a
Yeah.
nap. She knows that
Yeah.
she's out of alignment. How do you define alignment or balance or whatever? How's that work for you?
Uh, I think as I've gotten older and matured, I see it as something that it's not static. It's not static from individual to individual, and it's not static throughout your life.
Right.
So, like early on, it was nothing for me to work 60 hours a week because I didn't really think of it as work. It was just like, this is a thing I'm doing, and it's
Yeah.
just what I'm doing, you know? And
Yeah.
so to work all weekend on a project, we were doing a lot of video work at that time. And so you're working in kind of like weird hours, weird times. It was no big deal. Um, and right now I'm not in that space. I have a 14 and a 15-year-old, and they're only going to like me for about another 6 months. And so I'm in like crunch time.
Your intelligence has significantly dropped.
Yeah.
It does come back in
I
your
was a
life.
lot smarter last year.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I've gotten a lot dumber.
In
And
about 5 or 6 years down the road, you'll get smart again, just so you know.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
amazing.
So I think it's giving yourself kind of like grace and flexibility just to acknowledge that there are just like part times in your life where it's just going to be different. And,
Yeah.
right now it's, I want to have the flexibility to do things with them because it's not going to be forever. It's such a short window. And
Yeah.
so like for me, the balance or alignment now is, I don't work all that much comparatively to what to the time I've put in. But I
Right.
think I've gotten a lot smarter, and I don't waste a lot of time on things that don't matter anymore. And so like delegating, prioritizing, being focused, figuring out when I can work best. So I think, if I can work 4 or 5 hours, 6 hours, now I can do what I used to do in 8 or 9 hours just
Yeah.
because I know how to do it,
Yeah.
and I'm better at it. So like I want to be able to go pick them up at 3:30 and take them to soccer practice. It's just like what I want to do. And
Right.
it's at some point, it's like if you're an entrepreneur, it's like it's kind of a pain in the ass. It's like if like your flexibility is sort of like the main thing you have. If you don't take
Yeah.
advantage of it, it's kind of
100%.
on you, you
Yeah.
know? So that's kind of where I am right now. I want it to be as flexible as possible. And luckily, the nice thing about COVID for us is it just kind of like we'd always been sort of half distributed, and then it kind of like fully distributed everything. And
Yeah.
so I can work from home. And again, I can work much more efficiently at home without the distractions, and I can segment my time a little easier.
Yeah.
And just like technology, like last night, I took my son to his soccer game. He needed to be there 45 minutes early. So I sat in the car, turned on my hotspot, and was able to like knock out a few things that I didn't get done that I needed to get done, and then I
Yeah.
could just like go enjoy the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's like stuff like that that's like taking advantage of the windows of time, prioritizing, taking control of your schedule.
Yeah.
Those are things that make me feel in alignment, and I think you can get quite a bit done. I tend to think people that are always complaining about being busy want to be busy. I think,
There is a badge of honor somewhere,
yeah,
isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, I think it's either um, it's just like it's usually lack of organization. So it's usually like you're busy because you're disorganized, and that's
Yeah.
your fault, or you're too busy because you won't delegate, and that's also your fault. So
Exactly.
for me, it's sort of like,
And
I
you're
don't know.
taking some of the best coaching advice that I give, man.
Listen to John, smart
Yeah,
guy.
that's that's right. Right. I'm curious about one more thing. I know we're probably gone over time, but I think you and I could talk for 2 hours if we wanted.
Right.
But um, uh, I'm a big AI. I was one of like probably the first. I was in that first wave that signed up for Chat GPT as soon as it came
Mhm.
out. Had to wait for a couple of weeks for them to have capacity, all that kind of stuff. And I see both the value and I see the danger of it. I'm one of these people who believe kind of it's like the internet. Internet
Yep.
can be used for great good. It can be used for great, terrible things. I feel
Totally.
the same way about AI. In your space, it's got to have a huge impact.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I mean, if AI had been around when I was going through my naming, I can imagine me just spending quite a bit of time going back and forth, going, "Hey, how about this? How about
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
how are you all using AI?" And don't want to give away trade secrets or make or any or cause people to think, "Oh, there's nothing that nothing." Obviously, there's a lot that you do that AI still can't. But uh,
Yeah.
just talk about that for a moment.
Sure. It's a great question. Um, it's the question, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
um,
of right now, I think
of
so.
right now. So the way so big picture, I can like big picture how I'm thinking about it, and then more how specifically we use it right now. So big picture, I'm planning for a future 3 years out where people don't pay us for what we've historically done. I think there's a very real threat that within 3 years, people won't want to pay us to create names, to create logos, to create websites that
Right.
launch their business. Those are the historically, like, obviously I can't distill it down to just that, but those are like the main deliverables that people kind of want coming in. Now, luckily, people find a lot of value in the process. And so I think, and I think we're not alone in that like kind of like prediction of like maybe we won't, when I think about the industry that we serve, if you're an architect and you're mainly doing architecture that could be pretty easily repeatable by a machine, it will be, so it's like if you're
Yeah.
designing schools or something where it's like really restricted by code, and you know I think a lot of that work will be replaced. And so I think a lot of our clients, financial services, architecture, planning, engineering, like a lot of that stuff, I think what I think is the opportunity for us is basically we haven't done a lot of brand positioning because the companies that come to us always come to us because they're successful. They're
Yeah.
successful, they've been successful, they know what they're doing. But I think that's going to change in the next couple of years. And there's going to be a lot of introspection around what are we doing? How do we actually add value for our clients? What's the real benefit we're providing here? And anything that can be automated will be. Um, and so that's the thing that I'm excited about. I think
Yeah.
this disruption will provide a lot of opportunity. And I think the people who jump in and are open will be able to realize a lot of opportunity. So that's kind of big picture how I'm thinking about it. In how we use it now. Um, so for naming, for example, we'll use it to like so in this project, I have this PR agency, and so I can at the beginning I can say, talking to the AI, what sort of metaphors should I be thinking about when I'm naming this agency? And so it'll list across, you might want to be thinking about uh, craftsmanship. You might want to be thinking about this gardening metaphor because of how they kind of like nurture and see things grow, or things like that that kind of help
Right.
stretch, like, oh, I maybe wouldn't have thought of it in that particular way.
Yeah.
And so we don't use it at all for name generation. We do all of that ourselves today, um, because that's still what our clients pay for. And again, like 6 months from now, it may be different. But for
Yeah.
right now, we do 100% of the name generation. We use it to do to help us think more broadly, and then we use it at the end to help um, weed out any obvious conflicts. We can just put a whole list of names in and say which ones have obvious conflicts in
Yeah.
the agency space, and it can like really quickly go through and pull out a few.
Yeah.
There are other like things that are sort of silly. So, like we just did a job for a regional orthodontics office. They have offices throughout the Midwest, and when you're launching a website, the big thing you have to think about is how do you get good high quality photography? And if you search the internet for stock photos of people with braces, it's a very dark place. It's just like there's
Okay.
not a lot and it's very depressing.
Okay.
And so like this is just a dumb example where now with kind of generative AI, you can take a photo of anyone and it can put braces on them. And you could have always done that with Photoshop or something, but each
Sure.
one would have taken a ton of time. And
Right.
so it took something that was really labor intensive. And now you can have an image of someone that didn't have braces, put braces on their teeth.
Yeah.
That's just an example of a way that it kind of streamlines part of our production. And so,
Sure.
I use it for like lots of different business things, feedback on blog posts,
Yeah.
how to think about how to like identify problems among our core customers, just making sure that we're talking about things in ways that would be resonant and relevant.
Yeah.
Um, Again, we don't use it to generate any sort of animation or logos currently. We still do all of
Right.
that kind of stuff. We actually shoot all the video, although that's changing a little bit too in like um, there we did an internal video, for example, and I stumbled over my words in this particular thing, and they just fixed it, and
Yeah.
had the AI make me say the right thing. And so they're like, "You notice you sound better than you usually sound?" I was like, "Yeah, I sound pretty good." They're like, "Yeah, that's because it's not you." I was like, "Oh, great."
Oh wow. Yeah, that is kind of scary. Some of the stuff you can do from that standpoint. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think yeah, I like how you said that you're open to the idea that AI is going to change how you do everything in the next 3 years, but
yeah,
people are still going to pay for your expertise in some way. It just might be a
yeah,
little different. And I feel the same way
yeah.
about coaching. I mean, people can do a lot of self coaching with AI, but the AI is not going to I always say the AI is not going to be able to look them in the eye, recognize that they're not telling them the truth, or or that they're squirming in the seat when you ask them that question.
Yep.
There's aspects of coaching that is at times uncomfortable. It's because hopefully you're getting real into what's going on in your business, and the AI is not going to be able to replicate that anytime soon. I don't think. Uh,
No,
so
I totally agree. I think we're similar in that, like the process of helping people know who they are is something an AI can't really do.
yeah,
It's because from within the business, you and sometimes you have kind of the worst perspective on it. You can't actually see it very clearly because you're so in the weeds. And so having someone who can step back, and so my point is when you're in the weeds, the AI is only as good as the inputs. And so I like
yeah,
if you can't, I just don't think from within without perspective that you can create the right questions sometimes,
right.
or create the right frameworks so that the machines can help you do what you need to do.
Yeah.
But
So
any,
what's next for you? What's where is Bullhorn headed?
well, the positioning, it's been over the course of about a year, we've been refining our positioning. And so refining down really with professional and financial services is fairly new. And so one of the things I'm trying to learn through a lot of trial and error as a business owner is that sometimes you want to change things faster than anyone else, and that sometimes it's even faster than is a good idea.
Yeah.
And so right now, I think we're in a period where I need to not change anything for a while, and we just need to kind of stay the course and um, take the time to write about and create the marketing materials around our expertise that we
Yeah.
have, and create the assets that help people, that really just provide value to folks, to help them kind of better understand um, what their business does, who it serves,
Yeah.
and how to
But that's
communicate that.
yeah, that's good. I'm gonna take some of that same advice for myself. I think
Yeah.
I need to let some things percolate a little bit. You have to kind of let you marinate it, right? And you let it sit there and see what happens with it. And there's a little bit that needs to happen for me. Well, I always like to
It's
kind of end with a question about just, there's been a ton of great advice
mm,
in this interview, but what piece of advice would you give to that young 30-year-old working in a bike shop that's thinking of starting doing something different? What would you say to him?
um, I think I would say it's not gonna happen overnight. Give yourself the time, and I think the hard part about an entrepreneur is, as a person who's kind of oriented towards visionary thinking or like forward thinking,
Yeah,
is that you're always projecting yourself and your company into the future. And when you that's like, unfortunately, it's rewarded um, in our culture and in the business community, the person who can do that. And oftentimes it's at their great personal detriment,
right.
because you can never enjoy what's happening in the moment. And so I think I spent the first 10 years not celebrating any wins, not like enjoying the successes that we had, because I was always thinking like, okay, what's the next thing? Like, what do we need to do next?
Right.
And um, and so I would say to that person, it's like, it's important to be able to see over the horizon, but if you don't appreciate what's happening right now, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Great.
Your life will be gone, and none of it will have mattered.
It's great advice, and I appreciate you sharing that. So if someone's out there and has a branding or naming need, how do they get in a hold of you?
We're at Bullhorn Creative, I think most everywhere on the internet, bullhorncreative.com. You can connect with me, Brad Flowers, at LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. We post a weekly newsletter on LinkedIn that has a lot of good advice or it's like a mix of like advice, case studies,
Yeah.
process, explanations. And that's called the Boilerplate, and that's a LinkedIn newsletter. So those are
Right.
some of the places that I would.
And buy the book, naming
And
book.
buy the book, the naming book. Yeah, the
I
naming.
assume
It's
it's on. Is it on Amazon? I assume. And
Yep. There's actually a website, thenamingbook.com.
okay,
But yeah, it's available anywhere you could buy books. They can get it for you.
excellent. So, well, Brad, thanks for coming on the show. It's been a great conversation. Enjoyed
Yeah.
getting to know more about you and your business, and you really did share some great pearls of wisdom today. So, I
Mm.
appreciate that very much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you liked it, please share or like it on whatever platform you use. You can find me on social media. On most platforms, I'm John K. Jennings. My first book is also available. Your Baby is Ugly tells you about 10 truths that business owners need to hear, but often won't, and how to overcome them. You can find it on Amazon. Just search for Your Baby is Ugly. And be watching for our next episode, where I'll interview another business owner who will share their stories and insights into what it's like to create a great business.